BCN Group, we were founded in 2009 and we've built a strong reputation for ultimately providing IT solutions to a whole range of customers, anything from SME, relatively small organisations, up to public sector and large enterprise organisations. I won't spend ages on this, but ultimately we support a number of work streams and a number of technology streams. The bit we're talking about today specifically is protect. So, you know, all things cyber and cyber protection and disaster recovery. We provide platform services. That's anything from on-premise servers right through to, you know, hybrid cloud, private cloud, Microsoft cloud, and all the rest of it. We have a significant data analytics arm of the business. We do an awful lot of automation using Microsoft Power Platform. An awful lot of reporting using Power BI and data analytics. Collaboration is our end user experience and typically Microsoft Office 365 platform. So ultimately leveraging the best out of those platforms, everything from device management to Teams collaboration to webinars and beyond. And I think the final bit, which gives us maybe some uniqueness, is our development arm. So we have quite a significant development arm where we do everything from relatively low code automation through to, you know, complete bespoke applications. I mean, for example, we sell a piece of software to the EU Navy to track pirate activity in the Gulf of Guinea. So everything from selling you a desktop PC or a mouse or a keyboard through to bespoke development. It goes without saying that anything we supply and maintain, we can manage for you, and with a whole heap of people who can take you from a, you know, conception and an idea through to you know, supporting and into an environment of continuous improvement. So I don't want to spend an awful lot on BCN. If anyone else is interested to know a little bit more, by all means pop a comment in the chat, or we'll have contact details at the end, and by all means reach out and ask questions. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Carly.
Rick. Right, just grab control. So I'm just going to run through basically what we see at the moment at BCN as some big risks. And I'd like to focus on one of the biggest threats that we see at the moment, which is that of ransomware. So since about 2019, this is estimated to have exploded basically by about 231% growth, according to Sonicwell's latest cyber threat report. And they estimate there's probably about 20 ransomware attempts every second now. So this is really staggering growth that we're seeing in this area. Many of these attacks are basically carried out by ransomware as a service. So a bit like what you might consume Microsoft 365. You know, the knowledge and skills needed to launch these attacks is not that high anymore. It's really quite simple to try and launch them. But when ransomware is successful, it really does cripple a business and an organization, causes operations to cease often. And more often than not, it can cause public disclosure of data, which might breach data protection laws. So when we're thinking about ransomware these days, it's not just an IT problem, it's a whole business problem. So it needs to have the right level of engagement from senior management teams right across the business, so the right protections and responses are in place. So I've been involved in a couple of cleanup operations now from ransomware, unfortunately, and we know that the lasting effects of ransomware can be weeks, months afterwards. So really do need to encourage that as much as possible is done to try and prevent them in the first place. So before I can run through those protections there, it's worthwhile understanding how ransomware attacks usually start. And quite a common one is still the old phishing email. So that's where someone gets a message in their inbox. Perhaps it's trying to harvest their credentials or get them to click on something that infects their machine with malware. And then from there, a ransomware operator might start to begin lateral movement within a network. Perhaps they're going to use common hacking tools like Mimikatz to try and get further network credentials, eventually leading to full network takeover. And very often we see this as well, whereby people will take over the backup systems and try and encrypt backup data as well before then encrypting production systems, leaving a business completely crippled. So not only do we see ransomware start from phishing attacks, though, we also see it start through known vulnerabilities. And again, on this graphic, we've got an explosion in the amount of known vulnerabilities on systems. So I'm sure most of you will remember the WannaCry ransomware attack a couple of years ago now that affected the NHS pretty badly. And it could have been a bit of a non-issue, really, if those systems had have been kept up to date, as Microsoft had actually patched the vulnerability about 2 months before the attacks began. So there's always things that can be done to prevent ransomware happening. And since that WannaCry incident, the number of vulnerabilities have just continued to skyrocket. So it shows no signs of slowing down. And the days of trying to patch manually should be thought of well and truly over. So other trends we see in the marketplace, as well as ransomware vulnerabilities, there's also been big changes in IT in recent years. So things like the adoption of cloud services have increased considerably. We've also got hybrid work since the pandemic, as quite a lot of people now work from home, and this has sort of shifted the landscape from potentially just being localized in a single office to potentially anywhere in the world. And probably when the pandemic started, there was a lot of just make it work happening. And now it's time to sort of reconsider that and make sure that things are actually done properly. So 2 stats I've got up on here that I find quite interesting according to Veeam, who are, I'm sure most of you are a big data protection company, that 36% of data is unrecoverable after a ransomware attack, and that 55% of businesses are still not backing up their Office 365 data. So these are 2 surprising stats, but I can definitely see that they're true. The Office 365 stat is probably a bit of a misconception that Microsoft are backing up data on their cloud services when they're not. There's a shared responsibility model involved, and you are definitely responsible for your data on that service. So what can we do to try and prevent your business from ending up in these stats? Well, quite a lot. And I guess that's what we're here to talk about today, to run through what we've called our security basics, as if your organization isn't doing these basics, then there's probably a high chance it's not a case of if, but when your business might end up in one of these stats. So hopefully you'll all be able to take away something from what I'll discuss today, as it might be the one thing that prevents you ending up in these stats. So I've broken down our security basics to 3 distinct categories, and the first of which is identify and protect. So these are areas which we'll focus on to try and prevent attacks happening, as I'm sure you'll agree that prevention is always better than the cure. Then we'll move on to detect, what we can do to really limit the scale of an attack. And then lastly, respond and recover, what we need to think about after a successful attack to get an organization back to business as usual as quickly as possible. That. So we'll start with systems and what we'd recommend all businesses to have in place in 2022. So firstly, within systems, we've got asset tracking and MDM. So key to being able to protect anything is firstly knowing what you need to protect. So your business should always have an up-to-date asset list of devices that have got access to organizational data. So here we're talking about laptops, mobile phones, tablets, as without this, it becomes really difficult to manage policies on these devices. and also managing the risk of potential vulnerabilities that might exist on them. So given today's workforce might be mobile, working from home, you have to have a suitable system in place that can manage all of these devices. So we would really recommend customers to look at something like Microsoft Intune to manage devices, as this will be able to effectively manage Windows, Mac OS, iPhones, Androids, the whole shooting match basically. And as already shown in that previous slide about vulnerabilities increasing, we should also definitely be looking at automated patching in this day and age. We would strongly recommend that critical and security updates are patched within 14 days. And if you can't achieve that manually, then you definitely should be having a solution in place that can do this automatically. We utilize a solution called ConnectWise Managed Patching at BCN, and I would really recommend that you invest in a system that can patch things. So this isn't just the operating system, this is third-party software on the device, and potentially firmware as well, as that's sort of like a growing vector. Next, all systems should be kept in support. So as you may know, that when operating systems go out of support, generally speaking, patches are no longer produced for them. So systems should be refreshed well ahead of end of support dates. The next two big events on that horizon, in October this year, we've got VMware 6.7 goes out of support. And then next year, next October, I think it is, Windows Server 2012 and Windows Server 2012 R2 goes out of support. So if you know you're running those systems, you should start planning now to refresh them. The last basic on systems is to ensure that all portable systems are encrypted by tooling like BitLocker on a device. And this can be managed really easily these days using tools like Microsoft Intune. And that also gives you some nice remote wipe features as well. So our next basic is around user access controls. And the first one that I've highlighted here around unique logons is fairly straightforward, but we still see this is quite common, that staff in the business might utilize the same username and password for their business logon for personal use. And the big risk there is that if that personal service gets breached in some way, it can then lead to your business getting breached afterwards. So it really needs to be discouraged, either by policy or by making your password policy technically enforced to such an extent that it becomes less of a threat. The next one on here, and perhaps one of the most important controls these days, is that of multi-factor authentication. And this should now be applied across all users for any service that can be accessed externally without question. Additionally, we would really recommend you to consider a secure MFA method, such as a mobile app. So if you're currently using SMS or text-based MFA, which is on that first graphic on the left, I'd really strongly recommend that you consider moving away from SMS-based MFA. So we've seen some attacks involving SIM swapping, and in particular where threat actors maybe have assistance at a mobile phone operator, which can lead to your SMS messages being diverted to threat actors in effect. Additionally, Microsoft are implementing a change soon to improve their mobile app from the notification base, so the image you see in the middle there, where you simply get approve and deny, as we've recently seen attacks whereby people will spam the notification to people's screens and in effect just trying to get people to submit and press accept or approve in the end. So there is a new option now called number matching, in MFA, and I would really highly recommend you go and turn this on if you're using MFA. And in effect, after you put your username and password in, instead of just getting approve or deny on your mobile app, you get a number and you have to return that number into the app to be able to sign in. The next two under user access controls, least privilege and approved software. I'll wrap these up together as they're quite sort of well tied together, as it's quite common for ransomware attacks to start on individual devices. So if you can remove things like local admin rights on users' machines, this is a double whammy, basically. So you'll stop people like ransomware operators being able to install malware on people's devices. Plus, you'll gain some good compliance by preventing your staff from installing software that you never approved for the business. So moving on to the next one, vulnerability scanning. We would really encourage you to do like an annual pen test with a third party of your external environment, so that all of your IP addresses that you might have, your office environments, any services that you host, just so you can verify that they are being kept up to date. There's no known vulnerabilities there. Next, we've got Cyber Essentials. So if anyone is unaware, this is a UK government-backed scheme, which we really find helps organisations to keep up to date with security in their environment. As this framework of Cyber Essentials changes every year with threats. So for instance, this year, MFA has become a minimum requirement to be able to pass Cyber Essentials. So it's well worth doing. It ensures that security is kept up to date within an organisation. And it's worth noting, if you do achieve Cyber Essentials, you gain a little bit of cyber insurance. Cyber Essentials Plus builds on top of Cyber Essentials by doing some verification. So it adds on end user testing of systems, download testing, account separation testing, MFA testing. So it's a great way to tick a few boxes of Cyber Essentials. Next up, network protection. So this is fairly simple, but you'll be surprised at some customers still not taking this seriously. But all edges of network should be protected by good enterprise-grade firewalls, and they should be subject to regular review. So rules get disabled if they're no longer needed. There should be business justification for any firewall rule. Also, end user devices should have software firewalls enabled, particularly if they're working from home. So make sure that things like Windows Firewall, or if you've got firewalls built into your antivirus, that they are actually enabled and working. When it comes to secure remote access, again, we're emphasizing here the need for MFA on anything that you get remote access via. So that maybe that's VPN or remote desktop. All these solutions do support MFA now. And if you happen to have one that doesn't support MFA, then it's probably time to refresh for a modern solution like Azure Virtual Desktop, for instance, that does support MFA. So lastly, in this section, we've got that of user training. So as mentioned previously, a common sort of initial attack vector for ransomware is that of phishing emails. And even with all the anti-spam systems in the world, occasionally phishing email does make it through. So it's important that your users can act as a bit of a shield as well and recognize phishing emails. And there's plenty of services now in the marketplace that can provide this using simulated phishing, like KnowBe4. Or if you've got Microsoft 365 E5 licensing in your stack, there are actually now attack simulation tools built in. And we use that at BCN. And it's quite surprising the amount of people you can catch out with it that will offer up credentials. The other thing in user training is to make sure that your users can actually understand how to choose a good password. So obviously there are bad passwords like password 123, but there are also really good passwords. And a common technique these days is that of 3 random words. So just mashing 3 random words together. It usually is quite easy for people to remember that and get them into the habit of choosing good, strong passwords that are unique to each service. We would now say that if someone's got MFA on their account, that minimum length of password should be 10 characters. And without MFA, you probably want to be at 12 characters. So if you look at this graphic here, I know from my days of admin in AD, it was very common to land on 8 characters with complexity. And as you can see in this graphic now, given the power of the cloud and renting boxes on Azure and AWS, you can actually crack that sort of password in minutes now. So 8 characters with complexity is no longer enough by itself. Moving on to detect. So what we can do to sort of limit an outbreak of ransomware. It's really key to make sure that all systems have got antivirus systems on them nowadays. As otherwise what you'll see if a threat actor gains network access is they'll find the machine on the network that hasn't got antivirus deployed on it. They will literally seek it out and go for it. As if they find a machine without AV, they can probably start deploying other tools onto there without setting off any alarms or alerts anywhere. It's also worth pointing out, if you haven't reviewed your antivirus software for some time, it may also be useful to consider more modern AV solutions, as quite a lot nowadays include some level of endpoint detection and response, or EDR. So this can really help to leverage cloud intelligence and to help spot attacks after they've started, quickly find out what's happening, and ultimately try and stop an attack before too much damage is actually done. Key consideration here is, of course, that ransomware attacks, if they do happen, they're most likely going to happen out of hours, as then there's less chance of humans actually being around to spot them. So if you can try and automate response, it really does help. And for those of you that are using Microsoft 365, and in particular the Business Premium licensing, Microsoft recently included something called Defender for Business. This is Microsoft's modern antivirus suite, and this does actually include their EDR. So if you're using Business Premium, you might be able to save a bit of money by switching to Defender for Business, drop your existing antivirus suite, and gain a really good detection tool with EDR. Same goes for spam filtering. Should always make sure you've got some sort of advanced threat protection package on your spam filter to try and protect against zero-day threats. Make sure that attachments and links that are sent through to users have got some kind of cloud intelligence in front of it. Again, with Business Premium, Microsoft include something called Defender for Office 365, which has all of these protections in there. So if you are using that license, it's great value for most businesses. Quite often, what you'll see happen with Defender for 365 is that it will proactively remove messages once it's known that they are threats. So that's trying to protect against things like zero-day threats in people's mailboxes. So quite a powerful tool, and quite often it will take action against emails before people have read them. Moving on to monitoring and logging, would really strongly recommend keeping a minimum of 1 month logs across all of your firewalls, VPN appliances, backup software, as this is key to try and detect when compromises may have been started in your environment. So we see it's quite common now for threat actors to breach networks, carry out reconnaissance, remain dormant in a network, often for weeks, before any sort of harm starts to be done, where maybe the ransomware software starts encrypting systems. So it's really important to have login turned on to somewhere that you can access those logs as well. Also, any alerting or compliance features are well worth investigating, and importantly, make sure that the alerts go to teams who have the capability to understand the alerts and also act on them in a timely manner. As we may see ransomware attacks that start in an evening, but if you don't have anyone working in an evening that would monitor that, then you may find the next day it's too late to act on it. Finally, coming on to respond and recover. So hopefully none of these items ever come to pass, but it's always better to plan for them and know how to respond if the worst does happen. So when it comes to communications these days, we're strongly advising all customers to have either a business continuity plan or a cyber incident response plan. And either of these documents should contain key contacts, escalation points, who's got authority to act within a business, and also suppliers who might be involved. Plus, the plan should be stored offline, as potentially during a ransomware attack, it's very likely that all electronic versions are going to be lost. It's also quite important to consider how you might communicate in the event of a ransomware attack or cyber attack, as your primary method of communication in the business may well be affected. So, what would you do if your email was down, Teams was down, your phone system was down? How would you communicate in and out of hours? All of these elements need to be considered and should be part of either that business continuity plan or cyber incident response plan. Ultimately, if you do fall victim to a cyber attack, it's very, very likely you're going to need to restore from backup. So it's critical to ensure that any on-premise data is well protected with an off-site copy to services like Veeam Cloud Connect, if you use Veeam, which would automate you getting backups off-site. It's also absolutely critical to know any passwords or keys that might be needed to recover that data, as without those, you might have backup data you can't recover. Same goes for any cloud data. So I mentioned previously that it's important to back up things like Office 365. That should be backed up outside of Microsoft systems just in case the worst happened on their end. And finally, we strongly encourage doing an annual DR test to make sure that all of the data that you are protecting is the right data and it is verified as actually being recoverable. So performing DR tests also will help inform if your current backup solution is fit for purpose and can actually recover you in any stated recovery time objectives. So that's the last of the security basics I'm going to run through. I'm going to pass over now to Laurence, who's going to run through cyber insurance.
Thank you, Carly. I will just take control. Good morning, everyone. So, as Rick pointed out, I'm Managing Director at Financial Affairs and our in-house cyber insurance specialist. So I just wanted to run through what cyber insurance is, some of the covers, and how that sort of operates, just to give everyone a brief overview. Cyber insurance is very much like insuring a building. So you have a building, you put an alarm on, you put the security in place, you put cameras up, very much like BCN would protect your IT system. But sometimes, there is an electrical fault. This is the same as a day zero event. So these are the things that are unpredictable that come up. Or you may have somebody who's left a physical door wide open, and that leads to theft. And this would be similar to human error on an IT system. So cyber insurance is there as a very much a fail-safe when everything else just doesn't go the right way or fails. It's my belief that cyber insurance will be the main insurance that people buy in the future. It is becoming more and more important to businesses, and as you can see from some of the stats Carly showed, you will get more and more sort of noise around attacks, more and more attacks to small businesses, and it isn't just the large businesses being attacked now. So I'll just run through what cyber insurance covers. For me, it just breaks down into 3 simple areas. So this is cyber crime, cyber liability, and cyber business interruption. And what I'll do is I'll just run through each one with an example of what the cover is, and a couple of examples around some real life things that we see in the market. So starting off with cyber crime. So your main covers, and I'll caveat all of this, is that not every cyber insurance policy is the same. This is just typically what we would deal with. So cybercrime, social engineering. So social engineering is effectively a loss of funds resulting from a social engineering campaign. This is, as an example, would be you get an email from a supplier that you know and trust, and they are saying, well, you know, we're just changing our bank. They send you a revised invoice, and you pay the funds over to that individual. And what happens is that the bank turn around and go, well, that's not our fault. You physically made the bank transfer, therefore we can't help you out, and you're out of pocket on those funds. So in a real life example of this, where somebody paid for 3 BMWs to the garage that they normally supply, the garage rang them and said, where's our money? And said, well, we haven't sent it, we haven't had it, and yeah, the individual was out of pocket and had to sort of repay for 3 BMWs, and it's not the best way to do. So social engineering cover would cover you for the cost of that fraud, basically. Extortion is where somebody would, this is sort of similar to crypto locking, or somebody would hack into your system and lock it down and ask you for a Bitcoin or some form of money. So the cyber insurance would make a judgment call normally to basically pay the ransom, or they would use sort of their cyber experts or your IT provider to help sort of recover that or move it on. This is quite common. I had an incident with one of our clients who was changing server, and the day it happened, he was moving servers, so he was sort of laughing about it. But had that not been the case, he would have lost his whole manufacturing plant because it was all linked to the server. Theft of funds is very much, hacking into your systems and gaining access to your bank accounts and your access codes if you keep them on there. I know some people will. And going into your bank and effectively just stealing money from your accounts. Again, your bank wouldn't really protect you against that because it's your fault for having the information available to hackers. So again, it just gives you that added protection. And bricking is where somebody comes in and physically damages the machine. So not every cyber attack is there to steal things. It's not always there to just hold you to ransom. Sometimes you do have a criminal element here where cyber criminals are just coming in and going, well, I'm just going to destroy this person's computer because I feel like it. So this is where they would come in, corrupt your hard drive, basically making over the data redundant and leaving you without a system to use. They're not really bothered about the money side. It's more about the ability to hack into a system and do that to you. So bricking cover would sort of cover you for the recovery of that data and hard drive if it is possible. It isn't always, but it's something that is really important in the world where we deal with quite a lot of software, and very rarely people think about the hardware aspects of these things. Moving on to liability. So these are the sort of lesser known elements of cyber insurance. Everyone focuses around the crime, but these for me are equally important. So your public relations. So what happens after a data incident? You know, you might get noise. You have to send your customers probably some communication, tell them that you've been hacked. Cyber insurance actually will, you know, help you minimize that reputational damage and help you with the PR. So, for instance, you have a cyber incident, you get access to a PR company. That PR company will provide you with guidance on how to communicate to customers, how to build trust, how to repair that trust over a period of time. And that can be quite invaluable for a business in this day and age of, you know, data security, and you hear noise all the time, and it can, you know, sort of upset that trust base with your clients. So it's really important that you do and send the right messages. And we're not always the best at communicating with our clients if that's not our strength. So having an external party to do that is very good. Transmission is equally another important one, and this is where, you know, unbeknownst to you, you have an attack on your system. You have a virus loaded into your system, maybe it's attached to some documents, you have no clue, it doesn't affect your system, it's not picked up by any sort of mechanism, and you send an email to one of your clients and that infects their system. It then shuts down their computers, their systems, and again, you know, they come back to you and go, well, you know, you've sent us this email, we're going to sue you because you've infected our system, it's come from your emails, you need to pay us for compensation in loss of income, recovering our data, etc., etc. So your cyber insurance policy would effectively pick this up and cover the costs of that transmission incident. Data loss is around obviously losing personal information. So this is a real hot topic, and we've seen a lot of examples around this where obviously major corporations are losing data, leaving them on trains, or just having a hack that has allowed data to be sent out into the world. Your insurance here would cover you against that data loss. So let's say your data was stolen and you know, you had a fine from the ICO. You know, your cyber insurance could pay for that fine. It would also help you again with the PR and sort of making good and putting that back into place and helping you with that sort of process of that data loss. And reputational damage again is similar. This is where, you know, you've had an incident and you're getting marketing and support around helping you fix that reputational damage, and that stays as long as, you know, you need to have that in place. So moving on to business interruption. So it's quite a hot topic through coming out of COVID. There was a lot of noise around business interruption for premises that shut during COVID. I just want you to all imagine a scenario where, you know, your business is closed because of a cyber incident. So this was sort of breaking down the covers here. You would have data reinstatement. So again, this is just what it says on the tin, reinstating the data after a physical attack on the systems. Most IT companies would look at this and be sort of looking, well, for whatever reason, the data has been damaged and it's going to take us X number of hours to fix it. Therefore, it's going to cost us X amount of monetary pounds to come in and fix this for you. This is where the insurance would kick in and pay for that time to reinstate that data. It can take a long time to recover data, and I'm sure BCN would be able to share sort of stats on how long it usually takes to recover a damaged hard drive, if at all. The good thing about this data reinstatement as well is if you then have to manually input that data back into your system, it provides you the time and the cost of the time. So let's say you had to go and recruit an administrator for 6 months to physically re-input physical records into a digital record. It would pay for that, and, you know, again, that can be quite invaluable if you lose data that can't be recovered. The main one here is loss of profit. So this is where your business is shut down for a period of time and effectively you can't trade. So if you had an online store and the website was stopped and you couldn't get a new one up and running for whatever reason, and you lost a week's worth of trade out the back of it, you would effectively be able to recover your gross profit from the loss and the incident. You know, we've seen manufacturing plants being shut down for 2 to 3 weeks because of things with servers being linked to all the machines. So they've lost 3 weeks worth of output, had to put additional staff on to come in and sort of put them back into the same position. So it's paying for all that loss of profit, increased costs of working, and helping you get back to the position you were in prior to the attack. Forensic cover. So this is where, you know, you might need a forensic IT specialist to come into the business and actually work out where this incident occurred. It's not always that clear. So, you know, you might be able to come in, prevent sort of further damage, fix the problem and shut it all down and get all your data back or unlock your system. Actually, what you want to know is, how did it happen? So having somebody who can forensically come in like a CSI investigator and really dig down into the system, find out exactly where the hole was, what the attack was, where it came in, can be invaluable because it prevents obviously that second attack or something else coming through. Incident response. So, you know, obviously if we had an attack ourselves, we would just call BCN, but some of that might be outside the scope of our contract. So it covers sort of the cost of that incident response. If you don't have an IT provider in-house, then it provides one for you. So imagine a sort of a crack team of IT experts coming to your door and helping you with that incident. It's critical in that first 12, 24 hours that you jump onto an incident, because that's where all the damage is done. If it's left longer than that, you know, it can be irreversible, some of the damage that has happened. So cyber insurance would pay for either your additional cost in the incident response or provide you with the people and cyber experts to come in. And this can be something as simple as just having a phone number to ring. Thinking, I think this has happened, can you just give me some advice on it? Or we sent this spam email and it's spammed all our contacts, what do we need to do? And again, it's just having somebody on the end of the phone just to talk to, but you can have physical people come to you as well. And again, it can be quite heavily in the sort of costs in comparative terms. Operator error. This is where your user, like I've done on the slide, you know, do something without their knowledge. So, or I put an exclamation mark in instead of the O. This is where your user has done something unbeknownst to them. So they've just been going about the normal day. They've got into something and deleted a piece of software that is actually crucial for the operation of a business, deleted a load of data by accident, and, you know, hands up, sorry, I did that. Most incidents we see actually are from human error, so clicking on phishing emails or doing something that they shouldn't have been done, plugging in USB drives when they shouldn't do, etc., etc. So it gives you that real fail-safe in that user who isn't an IT expert breaking the system unbeknownst to them. So I just wanted to sort of clarify. So a lot of questions we always get is, well, I don't need cyber insurance. I've got an expert in BCN, or my IT provider is great. I've got all the security in the world. I don't need a failsafe. We use BCN. We buy cyber insurance. It is equally important. So I'll just put a very small table. So I'll just run through the things. And if you answer yes to all of these, then you don't need cyber insurance. So if you run cash only business, you have no IT equipment for work, you hold no personal data, and you have no employees, then I would say you don't need cyber insurance. If one of those apply, then you need to really think about having cyber insurance in place. Thank you for that, and I'll just pass back to Rick for any questions.
Good stuff. Yeah, thanks everyone. So I mean, I guess just a very quick summary. You know, from someone who is less techie than Carly, and you know, who knows less about cyber insurance than Laurence. We see this very regularly, all day, every day. You know that the threats are pretty real, and the purpose of today isn't to frighten you, but I think the bit that Carly talked about in the basics, the cybersecurity basics, they are relatively straightforward, and the chances are you are investing in tools today that have got some of this functionality, and it needs to be configured properly and applied properly. So you know, if there's any questions, we'd love to take them now.